Good afternoon.
Good
On
afternoon.
behalf of Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, welcome to our 2020 interview series with candidates for the Oregon House, Senate, and County Commissioner. My name is Lori Kaplan, and I will be your moderator for this interview. As a tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofit organization, SOCAN cannot endorse candidates, but we can offer constituents information on where candidates stand on issues related to our mission. The focus of these interviews is therefore limited to questions about climate and the environment. All candidates for the general election have been invited to participate in these interviews. Some have accepted and others have declined. Today we will be speaking with Jerry Allen, a candidate for Senate District 2. Thank you, Jerry, for joining us for this session. The format is simple. We will have 2 minutes for candidate introductions, followed by 9 questions, each read by me. The candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. I'll provide a warning when there's 10 seconds remaining, and then I will advise when the 2 minutes are up, and we'll move on to the next question. The candidate will then have 2 minutes for closing remarks. To ensure a fair and balanced interview, all candidates receive the questions 7 days in advance and will be posed exactly the same questions. Also, to ensure fairness, there will be no follow-up questions. Jerry Allen, candidate for Senate District 2, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you like to make some opening remarks?
I would. Thank you very much. First, I want to thank SOCAN for hosting these. I believe it's really important for people to know the truth about where people stand and who are running for election. I'm running for the Senate because I believe that we need caring, compassionate, competent, cooperative leadership in our legislature in order to handle the huge crisis that we are in with the COVID virus and the economic crisis that is following on from it. We have a huge job to rebuild Oregon, hopefully building Oregon back better than it was before, more green and more inclusive and with jobs for people. I want to work on all of those issues. I'm going after the issue of how we handle the COVID virus and the economics and the other issues. I want to say just a bit more in the introduction about myself. I spent 24 years supervising social workers at Children's Protective Services. So I've had a career in government. I was before that a hospital executive and founded a clinic. I also was elected to 4 terms as a pension trustee in Sonoma County, a $2 billion pension fund of all the employees of Sonoma County. So I have a lot of governmental experience in that sense. I've worked on a lot of budgets. I've built alliances with Republican bankers who were on that board, and they elected me as the chairman of the board. I've had a chance to really work across the aisle, building alliances to try to do the people's business. I also understand the public health side of it because I have a master's in public health and am experienced in working with hospitals and hospital executives. I believe that we need those kinds of experience in the legislature. I'm here to step up and provide it. And I have a pledge to tell you. I pledge to tell the truth, to show up for work, to not evade my job as a legislator, and to always try to do the people's business in the very best way that I can. And that's my pledge to you.
Thank you, Jerry. The increasing droughts we have been facing have resulted in frequent and substantial water shortages. Please explain what you think state government and agencies should do to address the increasingly difficult problems of water availability and water rights.
Well, that's a really important issue. I'm a farmer in Selma. I have a little 10-acre farm where we raise fruit and vegetables and herbs. And I am very aware of this farming issue and the water issue that lies with it, and the concern about how do we do agriculture and rebuild our agriculture, and at the same time provide water for drinking water and everything else for the cities. So I have several thoughts about that. One is that I believe we need to do a great deal of work educating the entire agricultural farming community on how to do thrifty water. how to use the least water possible to get the job done of raising the crops. There are a lot of people who are not doing that yet, who have not mastered drip irrigation and all the other kinds of things that we need to do. We also have a lot of folks who have not done water catchment to try to catch water in ponds so that that can be used for during the other seasons to, or during the growing season to help augment the water that we have. We also have plenty of things that we need to do in our cities, tax credits and other kinds of things to get low flow toilets in every setting that we can possibly get them, and to really make ourselves water thrifty. I went through a big drought in '77 in California, and we learned how to live on 13 gallons of water a day. That was in a town. That was hard work. And it's hard work for everybody to learn how do we share this precious resource carefully. We also need to look closely at the issue of forest management. And because the trees are reservoirs of water, they hold water. If we cut down the trees, we've lost a lot of our water. And there's plenty more to talk about at another occasion.
Well, our next question is about forestry. Oregon's Forest Management Practices Act has not been revised for decades. Do you think it should be revised? And if so, how?
Yes, it should be revised. We do not have a Forest Management Act that takes fully into account the dire situation of our climate situation. Now, there are people who say, oh, there's not a climate problem. My opponent says, oh, no problem whatsoever. But actually, NASA on its own website says, you know, this is for real. 96% of the scientists who work in that field say this is for real. The US military has fully brought that into their planning. It's a truth that we face. And our grandchildren and our children are looking at us to say, what are you going to do about this? So a big piece of it has to do with how we manage the forests. Now, the old growth forests are fairly immune to fire. They're hard to burn. They also store a huge amount of carbon, a hugely important greenhouse gas. Whereas if we cut them down and just put in Douglas fir plantations, those are very prone to fire. And so the ways in which we manage handling the forest is huge, and we need to update that act. We need to make sure that there are timber jobs especially in dead and dying trees. Those trees aren't sequestering carbon anymore, so they're not helping us. So we can have a lot of cutting of those and provide timber jobs, forestry jobs, for years to come, rather than the boom and bust approach of like my opponent Art Robinson says, just let the timber companies do what they want and they'll manage it. Well, how's that working out for us?
Oregon's wildlife management plan has included removal of wolves from the state endangered species list and a proposal to allow bear hunting along the wild and scenic Rogue River. Do you think it is important to conserve Oregon's bears, endangered wolves, and other wildlife species at risk? Please explain why and identify where this ranks in your priority list.
This ranks high on my priority list because I believe that we need to reinforce the Endangered Species Act in Oregon. I believe that we need to protect not only the bears and the wolves, but also the fishers. And there's plenty of other species that are endangered. And you could think of it, the way I like to think of it, is a woven fabric of life. We cannot just let a whole huge number of species go extinct and expect that somehow the earth is just going to be fine. It's not. It's a web of life, and each creature has a purpose and a right to be here. And we need to figure out, how can we work together with Mother Nature and with the creatures, the wildlife and the trees and forests, to have a long-term good effect. And I might say that just on the financial side, one of the most important industries in our region is tourism. So if we have good forest management and retain the scenic beauty of our area and retain the non-silting of our streams so that the salmon and other fish can survive, then the fishermen will come here, the bicyclists will come here, the native uh, plants and animals are an attraction. We live in one of the most biodiverse areas in the whole world, maybe out of 7 areas. This Southern Oregon and the Klamath Siskiyou counties are a hugely important area. Let's protect it, preserve it, and keep industry of tourism coming here.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Ah.
That's all right. I have that alarm on my system. It means it's time to go close up the chicken pen at night.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. Given that some segments of Oregon's population suffer more extensively than most from adverse climate impacts and toxic pollution, how should we invest in correcting health and other social inequities as part of our response to climate change?
It's an important question. It's certainly been highlighted lately. And I think that it's important to give voice to all the segments of the population, people of color, Black people, indigenous people here, people whose lifestyle is different than maybe somebody else's, young people, elders. We need to bring everybody in. And as a senator, I will work to make sure that diverse groups are present at the hearings that we hold on key issues like what you're talking about right now. How do we build back Oregon in a better way? Now, an example would be something that I promote strongly is affordable housing. Affordable housing is very needed. And yet we need to be careful that we make sure that it's accessible to the widest range of people. That's why affordable housing is so good, because like one style that a friend of mine is building is duplexes, where they can get somebody into that for $500 to $700 a month mortgage, and then they can provide a home for another family. Well, we got to make sure that we have equal access, no redlining, no exclusively building affordable housing in areas where they're right next to diesel heavy freeways, as has been done in many Southern California areas. We need to make sure that we think through all of those ramifications. And the best way to do that is to have people at the table in those discussions who represent these different groups, so that we make sure that everyone has a voice in how we do this. And I will work to make that happen.
Thank you. Given the, oh, sorry, I skipped one. How do you think the state should promote and invest in clean jobs and a green economy as part of our efforts to reboot the economy following the COVID-19 crisis?
Boy, do I love that question. That is such an important question. A lot of people are talking about, well, you know, there's a budget crisis coming, and how are we going to have the money to do all of this that we need to do? And I want to say, I'm a jobs candidate. I believe deeply that we can do this. And I'm going to tell you a couple of examples. Affordable housing that I mentioned in my earlier response. One of the things that does, when we build a huge amount of affordable housing and build it in the right areas, zoned in the right ways, there's a lot of areas like even in Grants Pass where you can put a granny unit in, all those kind of things. What we do is we provide homes, we provide jobs, including building trade jobs. We do it greener, like all those new homes will be not cable ready, energy ready, solar ready. We do all of those things, and related to this question, we enlarge the tax base without raising taxes on anybody. Because when you build a house or a duplex or whatever it is, you have property tax on that. So we can bring in millions of dollars of property tax money to help fund our local counties, our local cities, and our state. We can do that all over the state and solve many problems at the same time. Okay, that's one example. The other example, what Massachusetts is doing, green bonds. Massachusetts is issuing green bonds to achieve many of these things that are in the public's interest that need to happen, but we don't have to take all that money out of the state's pocket. There are plenty of investment sources that want to help. And I can say I have experience with this. I was chairman of the investment committee of a $2 billion pension fund. I did so many trips to the East Coast to find those sources. The investors are willing to help us.
Thank you. Next question. Given the consensus among climate scientists that global warming is a reality and human activity is largely responsible, what do you think are Oregon's top 3 or 4 priorities to address the climate crisis?
Oh, top 3 or 4. Okay, so we have to reduce emissions, and we're working on that. And I have to say, I believe in the efforts to reduce emissions. At the same time, I want us to try to mitigate the impacts on working families. And I believe that we can do that. We can't raise all of the money of what we need to do through those mechanisms. We have to use other things like green bonds and other things to accomplish some of that. But certainly reducing emissions from transportation, shifting our electricity sources. Right now, I am told by the experts that I listen to that Oregon has about 37% of its energy that comes from coal. Coal is one of the worst offenders for increasing greenhouse gases. We need to get out of coal. Now, we happen to have good choices because, for instance, wind is cheaper than coal and employs far more people. It's a jobs plan. So is solar. Jobs plan. So we can do those things. I think, so what I'm talking about is shifting our energy mix. So we have reducing emissions, shifting our energy mix. And then the other thing is we can enlist the cadre of the people to say, okay, how can we do our share? How can we reduce driving? How can we retrofit on our homes, retrofit solar? How can we use some tax credits to get solar on our homes? How can we insulate? Do the other thing, weather stripping. All the little things that we can do that make a difference are huge. There are plenty more. If you look in the Drawdown Initiative book, it's got a lot of other great choices, but those are, I would mention as the top 3.
Great, thank you. Do you support Governor Brown's Executive Order 2004 establishing an Oregon Climate Action Plan? What elements of the executive order do you think should be strengthened and how?
Well, I do support it cautiously in the sense that I mentioned earlier. I want to see us do more to mitigate the effects, the cost effects on working families, because I'm mindful of that. And we have to bring everybody along into this grand coalition to get this done. This can't be just Democrats. It's got to be Democrats, independents, Republicans working together. So we have to listen. We have to figure out how to strengthen it in a way that can work. And there are complexities to some of those pieces. There's shared sacrifice in it, frankly, for all of us in some ways. But we want to figure out how we can mitigate that. And part of it is to tie together that order with new work on building a clean energy economy, because we can help people to afford those shifts if we give them jobs. We find jobs for our people. We have to do that. Many of our people are out of work. We need to find work and find green energy work for a lot of people, and that pays people's taxes. It does all the things that we need to get done.
Thank you. Fire ecologists argue that climate change is the single greatest contributor to wildfires. What do you think should be done in the short term and long term to address the problem of fire and smoke bedeviling Southern Oregon?
Well, that is a really important topic. I'm a volunteer with the Illinois Valley Fire District in the CERT program. I've experienced the Klondike Fire and the Taylor Creek Fire and the Natchez Fire and the ones before that, some of them when I was already here in Oregon. We have had choking smoke. We all know that this is a crucial issue. So I listen to the experts. I'm a real believer in listening to experts. I got training from Dr. Alan Journet about how the Mediterranean climate that we're in is fire prone. We need to look at the past practices that have worked, like our native peoples of this region and other regions, including in Australia, have used carefully controlled cool weather fire to knock out big patches of grasses, especially non-native grasses that are a causative source in fires. We also need to look carefully at how we manage the old growth forests, which are not very fire prone, and how we make sure that we do things to keep the logging roads that were originally there ready for the fire trucks so we can get in and stop those fires. We know that we've kind of painted ourselves in a corner in a little bit of a sense, in that we've built out our towns right close to these forests. We have to stop the fires, but we've got to find ways to do it that work and are effective. So we need to listen to the experts and get many people to the table, many groups to the table, to truly talk about how we can do that. The biggest thing we can do is we cut global warming so that then we don't have the increasing ground temperatures that are a huge factor in these fires.
Thank you. Now for our last question. Methane is a greenhouse gas 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Given the inevitable emissions of methane that would result from the proposed Pembina Jordan Cove LNG export facility and pipeline, please explain where you stand on the project and why you reached that conclusion.
Thank you. I'm opposed to it, completely opposed to it. Here's why. As a fire district CERT member, we've studied very closely the Cascadian subduction earthquake that's overdue right now. It comes every 300 years. It's about 20 years overdue. If that pipeline were built, that earthquake between an 8 and a 9 on the Richter scale would sever that pipeline in many places, resulting in terrible toxic waste being brought out from that. It also, that pipeline is not in tune with the direction we need to go in reducing our carbon footprint as a state. We need to go the other direction, not in the direction of more fossil fuels. So I think that for those reasons, we need to do it. We also need to, I want us to remember to look at methane in any other respect as well, beyond the Jordan Cove pipeline, because for instance, companies in the oil and gas industry are going belly up right now, and they are abandoning wells all over the place that have been fracking wells, shale oil wells, and they're just letting, there was an article very recently in the New York Times about it, they're letting that methane just gas out as they walk away from those wells. This is a terrible thing. It's a, as you said at the beginning, it's a far worse effect on the greenhouse gas situation than carbon dioxide. So we need to understand methane more deeply. That also means reducing food waste so that we don't have methane outgassing in the landfills. I try to go get that stuff and feed it to my chickens so that people don't throw it away.
Great, thank you so much. This concludes our interview with Jerry Allen, a candidate for Senate District 2. Thank you very much, Jerry, for joining us. To our viewers and to Carmen Prophet for driving the technology that made this possible. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this and for the work that you do at SOCAN.
Oh, I think I was supposed to give you additional time for closing remarks if you'd like to make that. My apologies.
Okay, well, I would say that I'm running because I want to make a difference. And I want a seat at the table in Salem where we can get these problems solved. I'm not going to be just standing outside yelling and screaming the way my opponent might. I'm going to be having a seat at the table and able to represent rural Oregon for what we need to get done. And that's important. And I thank you for the time to talk to people about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Jerry. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.